Hi everyone, it's Dr. C here. Today we're going to examine how to make an effective visual presentation. We've spent a little bit of time talking about public speaking and how elements of our speech can impact our presentation. Things like tone of voice, volume, our nonverbal communication and our mannerisms, how those things impact our ability to have a successful presentation. But the things that we say are only 50% of a presentation. Half of our presentation is going to be the visual elements that we present to our audience. I always tell students it's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You can have a peanut butter sandwich without jelly, but it's probably not going to taste very good unless you just love peanut butter and bread. And conversely, you could have a jelly sandwich with no peanut butter, but it probably also isn't going to taste that great. But if you combine the two together, then you have a really good sandwich that most of us have eaten at some point in our childhood. So I want you to think about a good presentation as like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You are half of that presentation. How you present yourself, the tone of your words, how you communicate verbally and non-verbally is half of that presentation. The other half is going to be what you present visually. And so I want to look at a few elements of this that I have identified over the years as things that will help you have a more effective overall presentation from a visual standpoint. So I want to get started with the fact that you should have a title slide. So every presentation that you give should have a title slide, and that's important because a lot of times you get to a room or you're maybe in a meeting before it actually starts as people come in, and you want to have your presentation pulled up in advance. You don't want to pull, if you have the opportunity to do so, you want to have it already on the screen. You want to have it ready to go before your presentation or meeting actually starts. And so you're going to have your title slide up there. So as people prepare and wait for your presentation to begin, they'll see what your presentation is going to be about, and they'll also see your name. That's going to be important, especially if you're presenting to people who you may not have a direct relationship with, or they may not know you personally or have worked with you before. So you will always see title slides on my presentations. Any presentation that I have given are posted online, are given in face-to-face class, has always had a title slide because it's important to let you know what we're going to talk about that day. So here's one example from a leading and working in teams presentation. And here's another example from an interpersonal communication lecture on friendship. So you see on both of those the use of a graphic that relates to that topic. And then you see my name and also PhD there, which for an audience who may not know me is going to enhance my credibility. It's going to let them know, hey, okay, this guy has a degree, a high-level degree. Maybe he knows a little bit more about this. So always have a topic slide with your name and title if you have one. The second thing is that all presentations should have an agenda or an overview. And that's going to be important for a few things, but it's particularly important if we're talking about business and professional communication context, because you want to provide your audience an overview of what it is that you're going to cover, a roadmap per se. This is also important from a different point of view, which is that it is increasingly hard to control the, or not control, but to capture and maintain the attention of an audience. And so what happens naturally is that people pay really good attention in the beginning of a presentation, and then they zone out in the middle of a presentation because we're thinking about all of the things that we've got that's going on in our own life. And then we hear, and now I'm going to talk about, and our brains take us back to this agenda slide and think, oh, well, they're wrapping up. So guess what we do when we know someone's wrapping up? Well, we pay more attention because we want people to think that we're engaged in paying attention to their presentation. So this is important from a few things. This is actually a particular PowerPoint template that I had helped create and use, which actually you see the little gray dots at the top. That gray dot would move to the additional themes there as the presentation went along, so people could see where I was in the presentation. So for some presentations, I will use this specific template if I think time is important to help the audience. Otherwise, I use the template that I'm going to talk about now. And so a few things that you see here is we're going to talk about the rule of three. And the rule of three is a very simple and easy thing to remember when it comes to presentations. You'll see one, the communicating in friendships, here's the title. So you'll see an actual title bar across the top of the page, which indicates to the audience what that page or what that slide is talking about. And then you will see the use of a photo or a graphic on the right hand side of the page there. And then you will also see a text block. So we call this balance and being visually balanced. So you will always, or you should have in most cases, a title theme. You should have a graphic or a picture that relates to the information, and then your text. If you do that and it's balanced like this, then that rule of three is going to help you because your presentations are going to be more visually impactful and effective. So how do we do that? Well, let's talk about that. This is a slide I actually went back and I found this from one of my very first teaching presentations or teaching PowerPoints from about 8 years ago. And so it was remarkable to myself just how far I've come in terms of how my own presentations look. Now, thankfully, you guys get to benefit from the years of experience and growth that have occurred since then. But a lot of people make these mistakes, the mistakes that I was making then, which is you just put your words on the slide and you use a very bland or what we think sometimes is a colorful background, which may not be the best case. And I want to actually look at that before I go back to this. So let's go back to this slide here, and I want to show you the difference. One of the things that you will notice in my presentations is that I try to have very clean and crisp looking presentations. If you look at most of my lectures, they follow this standard format, and this is something that I've learned that really does make a difference. So a lot of times people think, let's go to design here. A lot of times people think, oh, let's make it really colorful. And so here we go. And we'll wind up with something like this. And is it colorful? Yes. Is it harder to read? Yes. Is it visually impactful or is it visually distracting? I'm going to go with distracting. And again, these are mistakes that students make because they just pick something from the top that they think is going to be an impactful background. So there's a lot of different things here. You'll see these. I see these in presentations all the time, and they're standard PowerPoint templates. And because they're in PowerPoint, people think, well, PowerPoint has these here for us to choose, therefore these must be fantastic. And that simply isn't the case. And so you can go through and you can see some of these of how they change the visuals and the look of I see this one a lot in professional developments put on by other people. I don't know why people are drawn to this type of template. Again, it's not horrible. I mean, this is something that I see all the time, so it's not horrible, but it could be so much better. If we look at this, it just makes it so much busier and unnecessary. So I learned a long time ago let's go back so we can get back to my original template here. I learned to use just a plain white background and let my text and my graphics speak. I get people all the time come up to me after presentation and they say, your presentation was so nice. I love your template. What are you using? And I always chuckle because I'm like, I'm using a plain white background, a plain template, and I'm just adding the text and elements to it. So an additional component I want to talk about that students make, an issue or problem that students have, is that you have slides that you put way too much information on. And there's nothing worse than a wordy slide. You have seen these, you have all made these mistakes before. And it's just because we want to put everything on the screen. We want our audience to be able to read everything that's there. And one, it's impossible for your audience to read so much text, especially if you're in a large room. And two, when you put all of your words on the PowerPoint itself, we have a tendency to turn around and read directly from the PowerPoint. And that's not good. That's not a good way of presenting, because it sends the impression to our audience members that maybe we're not as prepared as we should be, that we're simply reading from our PowerPoints. And we don't want to do that. And the last thing with this is that your audience is less likely to pay attention to you if there's a lot of words on the screen, because I can guarantee you that you've done something in the last 30 seconds, and that is that you have read some of the text on this slide. How do I know that? Well, I'm not a mind reader, but I understand human nature. And human nature tells us that if there's a slide in front of us or anything with a lot of words on it, we are going to read it. And when we're reading, we are not listening. And when we're not listening, we're not comprehending. And therefore, if you put a lot of words on your PowerPoint or on your presentation, you're essentially starting from the point of saying, you know what, my audience is not going to listen and pay attention and understand, because they're going to be reading this information. So you want to make it easy for them. So we want to avoid text-heavy slides. So here's another example of a slide from one of my recent presentations, or class lectures. And you'll see the rule of three here. You'll see a heading for the page. You will see an image, and you will then see a text block. And so that check mark I added there for us, because it highlights the fact that there's not a lot of text there. There's a visual component to balance out what is there, and there are bullet points. So the audience can read the bullet points while listening to my presentation, and it's going to be much better than if I have detailed long sentences and no visuals. So you can see here the difference that makes. Now, as we move along, I do want to highlight that not all slides have to have text at all, or a lot of text. So in this instance, this was a slide where I was talking about being a solo player at work isn't an option in today's workforce and workplaces. You have to be a team player. You have to be willing to collaborate and get along with other people. And so I didn't need a lot of text to convey that point to students. In this one image, that image conveys it, and then I can talk about it without having a lot of text added to that slide, and that makes it easier for your audience. And so don't be afraid to mix these types of slides in with your slides that do have text, because it also gives your audience a break and it helps with your presentation. So the point of this slide here is to show you that the use of graphics is important and can be important, but you want to make sure that your images are intentional, that they're purposeful. So I'm talking about the modern workplace. I needed a picture that indicated very clearly that it was a workplace. Right? I didn't need a random picture. I actually found this from Google by typing in the search bar random pictures. There are threads of just random pics, which is actually pretty cool when you think about it. But you want to make sure that your photo is intentional, because if the photo doesn't go along with what you're talking about or doesn't go along with the text, then it's going to confuse your audience, and your audience is going to be thinking, what is that? Why did they choose that picture? And again, if they're thinking those things, then they're not paying attention. So remember, the photo needs to be intentional. It needs to be relevant to the slide that you're talking about. So this slide here, what I want to show you with these is this slide on the surface looks very balanced. It has the elements of three. It has a photo, it has a text block, and it has a heading. But there's some things that I now want to talk about that we can do to make these slides better. So now that we've talked about the rule of three and the importance of visuals, then let's look at how we can make that better. And so if we take this slide and we have the rule of three here, the first thing that I would do, I'll give you a little bit of background too. I taught presentation skills to MBA students while at the University of Wisconsin, where I would specifically look at their presentation slide decks and we'd have a checklist of things that I would look for to help them improve. And so these are some of the things that I would point out to them that I have since passed on to my other students. So the first is, while this does have a title, the spacing of the text here is a little off. So I can just pull my text bar and I can make that title go across the top of the page, which is going to be a lot nicer than what it was before. It looks a little unbalanced, so I'm going to make this picture a little bit larger so it's more visually interesting. And this text here looks now in relationship a little small, so I'm going to take it from 18 font to 20 font. And automatically there, now that looks a lot better. So you can play around with the spacing to line it up. If you're like me and you have a little bit of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, you're going to look at the spacing and things like that. But that's going to look a lot better in that instance than what it did before. Now if we go here and we look at this slide again looks like looks like a slide that on the surface is good, but there are a few things here that we can do. And so for the first, I want you to see here that the spacing of this text box here is way out of line. It's way to the left of my heading there, and this picture is a little bit too large. So I'm going to shrink the picture, pull the picture over. I'm going to move my text box to align, and you'll see that little line there, line up. PowerPoint does a great job. I'm going to move that text up so it's more centered. And then I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to format it. So this photo here is okay how it is, but we can just add a little white box to it since I'm using a white background. And to me, that looks a little bit better. Again, it wasn't horrible to begin with, but now it is a little bit more consistent and nice. That's going to take me to my next point, which is going to be the use of what I call white space images or isolated white backgrounds. So if I'm going to give a presentation about honeybees, or I'm going to have a honeybee image in a presentation or slide, I can just find pictures of bees, which is a standard picture on the right, or I can find the picture on the left, which is an isolated white background. And all you have to do is type in whatever image you're searching for into Google. In this instance, it was honeybee, and after honeybee, put isolated white background. And then it will pop these images up. And the cool thing about this is those images then blend in to your white background. So when you're using a clean, crisp presentation format like myself, and you use these isolated white backgrounds, your images just blend in and they're really nicely done. A lot of times people don't even think that it's a PowerPoint. They think I've used some sort of visual editing software to do it, and I'm like, nope, it just takes a little bit more time to find images that, one, are relevant, and two, that have that isolated white background. So try that as you work on presentations. Here's another example. An image on the right is an image of people at work, team setting, or friends. And on the left, you see the same type of image, but you see it on an isolated white background. One image blends in and makes the presentation cleaner and crisper, and the other is okay, but it doesn't blend as well. So it's a little bit of a messier presentation there. So you can see how this can impact. Now I want to take you to the next concept that I want to talk about, and this is a really big one for me, and this is something that students and people do all of the time, and it really does drive me a little bit crazy, and that is that they will put a link to a video that they want to show as part of their presentation, or maybe they won't even link to it. They'll just say, and now I want to show you a video, and then they go out of their presentation, they go into Internet Explorer, Safari, they go to YouTube, they search in the video, they find it, they pull it up, they play it, and then after that minute process, the sound doesn't work, or the video, something's not right, and they've wasted 3 to 4 minutes to try to incorporate this video that they wanted to show you. And so at the very least, you should have a text link or a hyperlink to a video. So this is a video from YouTube, and what you can do here is just copy that text, and then when you go to when you look at some options here, you can go to Insert, and you're going to go to Link, and that's the text. The actual address is going to go there, and let's put diversity video. Say that's what it is. Hit OK. Then now that big block of text is now a link to diversity video. I might put an image here that's diversity related, and then I have this link beside it. And then when I get to this, all I have to do is click on that link, and it is going to go automatically to that YouTube video without me having to leave the PowerPoint, without me having to go through any of that information. It's going to be there automatically, which is pretty cool. Now, that's at the simplest. You should do that. At the basic level, you should at least incorporate a link like this that's not a huge block of text. I go a step further. Now, some PowerPoints, this PowerPoint will, for example, video or PowerPoint update won't allow me to do it. So it depends on what version you have, but there might be an option here that says a movie from online or online video. And you can just go to YouTube, search in, or put the link directly, and then it will embed that video. I use video software that they're not expensive. You can get some relatively cheap. There's also websites that do it where you can put the link of a YouTube video into that website and then download that video to your computer. And then once it's on your computer, you can go to movie from file or browser and say this is the video that I want to do. And then you can just insert that video directly into your PowerPoint, and then you don't even have to exit your PowerPoint. You can click on the animations on the video format. We can do video format. We can change to make it a softer background or softer approach. Actually, that just lightened the whole background. So there's some pretty cool things that we can do there. We can do borders or not borders, video effects, all sorts of things we can do. We can set it to play in full screen, and we can, let's see, we're going to fade in at the half-second mark, and we're going to set it to automatically play when we get to that screen. So now, if we go back to our presentation and we're talking about this, then we know the next slide is going to be a video. So we can say, and now I'm going to show you a video, a short video about, and then when you hit spacebar or hit the next button on your clicker, then it is going to bring the video up.
Hey again, guys, it's Dr. C. I want to talk a little bit about our assignment.
And automatically play it. Now, is that not so much better than someone saying, no, hold on, I'm going to find you a video, exiting the PowerPoint, trying to find it, and then it not working? Now, the one downside to incorporating videos like that directly into the PowerPoint is that it does make the files much larger. So the file sizes are larger. So you do want to be aware of that in the event that you have a smaller capacity flash drive. But the main benefit of that is, one, it makes your presentation a lot nicer, but then you know that video is there. What happens if you got a major presentation to present and you've got a link to a video on YouTube and you get there and the internet's not working? Or they're having connectivity issues. Maybe the website's down that day. And it was a really important video. You thought, wow, this is something that's really going to make my presentation better. Well, by downloading and embedding those videos directly, guess what? You don't ever have to worry about that. The video is there. It's in your presentation. It is always there. This is really important for me as a teacher because I find videos I think are useful to students. And I've gone back before and those videos aren't there anymore. They've been taken down, they've been removed, etc. Well, if I have that downloaded into my presentation, guess what? I always have it. So that takes us to the final things that I want to talk about, and that's parallelism. Parallelism is a fancy word for matching. And so a good example of this is to think about socks. You get up one day and you're running late for school or work, and you just reach into the drawer and you grab some socks and you put them on, and you don't think anything about it until you get to work and one of your colleagues, or you get to school and one of your friends says, "Hey Rick, what are you doing with those socks?" And you're like, "What?" And you look down and you realize that you're wearing two completely different colored socks. Now, is that going to be the worst thing that ever happened to you? No. Is it going to ruin your day? Not likely. But is it something that's going to make you self-conscious? Yes. Is it something that people are going to notice and think, well, why is he wearing different socks? Probably so. And so that's what parallelism is. Parallelism means matching. And we look for matching in our presentations just as the final element of success. So if you've taken the things that I've talked about up until this point and you've incorporated those into your presentations, then you're going to have a really, really good foundation. And now we can look at the finite or the more specific things that can then impact our presentations. And so, for instance, if you look at this, if we look at matching, we want to make sure that our slides match within the presentation. So we're looking at font, we're looking at color of font, and we want to make sure that those things match, font size, that those things match. I don't want to use Times New Roman on 2 slides, Courier on another, and then special character font on another slide. I want to make sure that all of my slides use the same font size, and the same color. And that's parallelism. Does it match? It just makes the presentation more visually impactful for our audience. Not in a way that's going to stand out in a good way, but in a way that if it doesn't match, people notice that. And again, if they're noticing those small things within your presentation, then what are they not doing? They're not listening. They're not paying attention. So for instance, here you'll see the title slide here. I've got the 5 on the opposite side, whereas all my other titles were in line. So you see here that difference. Small difference, but matters. You'll also see some things here that maybe you didn't see before. Let's look at it. So you got your title page, but then within, you see the second arrow here, second arrow there. You see under the number 1, the S in size is capitalized, while on the number 2, the S in shared is lowercase. You'll see shared purpose, period. You'll see interaction over time, period. And then you see interdependence and identity with no periods. So we call that consistency and parallelism. So be consistent. There is no right or wrong. Do you have to put a period after those? No. Do they have to be uppercase to start or lowercase? No. There's no specific rules about those things. But what you have to do is be consistent in your approach. So if you make one word capitalized, then make all of the words at the start of your list capitalized. If you use a period at the end of your first bullet point, then use a period at the end of all of your bullet points, or vice versa. You just want to be consistent with that practice, as that's going to have an impact on your presentation. So you'll see there again, the indication of this slide, my last point here that I want to make is this. Don't get fancy. You know, people choose those colorful backgrounds because they think fancy is better. And because of that, they also add in a lot of animations. Animations do not necessarily enhance a presentation. There are times when you can use them effectively, but the overuse of animations within a presentation is distracting to your audience, and it can actually get annoying. And again, people will be like, what's going on here? So I don't need pictures to float in and zoom. I don't need my size of my font to do weird stuff like that. I don't need a wave effect of my titles. I don't need things to underline themselves in order to capture attention. There's just way too much going on there. And so keep it simple. So in a nutshell, the things that we've talked about today is how you can create a visual impact through your presentation by just using a clean, crisp presentation, by practicing parallelism to make sure that your slides match. Embed your videos as a way of safeguarding your videos and making it much easier to access those, and transition easier within your presentation. And the other items that we've talked about, if you incorporate some of those very small things into your presentations, you will find that the visual element of those presentations is going to be a lot nicer. And when it's nice like that, then you can focus on working on the tone and the volume and the verbals and the nonverbals and the other public speaking elements of things to really have a creative and engaging presentation for your audience. And then you're going to be remembered. And if you're remembered, you're going to be successful, especially with your presentations. If you have any questions or I can be of any help with any of these, please let me know. That's our lecture for today.